Welcome, team. Slightly more complex issue. Just while our team get themselves settled to explain this one to us, I just want to raise an issue that did come up this morning, and this is the perfect time to raise it. We had the announcement by government over the weekend with Minister Nikki Kay talking about the metro schools and looking for opportunities to place on parks and council land. I'm very, very keen that we get on the front foot on this issue. We don't want this planned around us, and we don't want this done to us. We're already working in that kind of partnership with schools. We've got this as an example. We've got Henderson High, where we built a hockey pitch. Council built in conjunction with the hockey community, a large hockey pitch, and there are several other examples. So we're already doing this. I think we've got a fantastic opportunity to work with government on shared facilities and shared opportunities to activate schools post 3 o'clock and to work on collaborative opportunities for our open space being used at times when it's completely underutilised, in other words, when our children are at school. So I just want to signal that work and discussion is underway. I think some people have expressed a little bit of alarm about it. I see, if we're in the driving seat, that we've got huge opportunities, and we might even get government to open their purse strings and open their coffers and actually help with some of the operation of these. So it's just in that context that we introduce this item. And I also just want to take a moment to actually acknowledge the beloved principal of Western Springs who passed away recently, and Ken Havel was known and loved by many, and I think it's just timely as we talk about Western Springs College to acknowledge Ken. So I just want to check. So Shale, would you like to just speak at the beginning of this?
Or after the introduction? Yeah. Over to you, Madam Chair.
Why don't you just go for it?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Shale Chambers, Deputy Chair of Waitemata Local Board, the Inner City Board. I was actually going to canvass many of the issues, Madam Chair, that you've just raised, because as a local board, we are very, very conscious of the inner city issues and the competition for space and the value of land and the underutilised potential of the schools, and conversely, the ability of the Crown to leverage off our wonderful inner city park system. It's not actually new to the inner city. I mean, Auckland girls have used the Western Park sports field for since 1922. There's been an arrangement with the Crown, but we have a unique opportunity, and everyone probably knows that I'm laboured to the bone, but we have an opportunity with this Minister of Education to actually make some progress in this space. And this before you today, whilst expensive and a significant step, is a vital step in terms of progressing the partnership. Many of you may not know, but I was chair of the Central Facilities Partnership when local boards were taking baby steps in this space, as was the North Shore, in terms of leveraging off our schools, in terms of assisting with upgrading of tennis courts or sports fields, and assisting sports clubs to invest in small steps in terms of additional indoor facilities, Auckland girls, Epsom girls, for example, and TriStar gymnastics and others on the isthmus. But we have a significant shortage in the isthmus area in particular of indoor recreational, formal, organised sport space, and you have the numbers in front of you here. Obviously it is 13 courts now and projected to grow to 42. I haven't had an opportunity to say this, but in 2010, when Auckland Council was formed, Waitemata Local Board's resident population, which of course is not the 130,000 that come into the city centre and have business after hours, recreational, formal and informal sport as well, was 70,300. Today it stands at 101,500. That's over a 30% increase and projected to continue. Waitemata has the largest growth, but Oraki and Albert Eden surrounding also have the largest shortfall in terms of sports field capacity. So obviously as you get from the inner city out to the isthmus and beyond, the shortfall increases. So I'm here to say that this is a fantastic opportunity, that the Community and School Partnership Project is an enhanced version of what we were doing at the local board level, and before that Auckland City Council and the North Shore Council in particular, but Manukau as well. And that this has been identified as a project. So this is the next step in that. It's already been identified, the opportunities identified, and this is now presented with you. And it comes with the luxury, if you read the paper obviously carefully, that even the $2 million original budget actually is within budget. It's not an unbudgeted item. It does take us all the chunk of a budgeted item. But if this is not a large project that's worthy and identified, then I don't know what is. So the budget's there, and there is the future budget and the long-term plan as well. So by supporting this, we're not only supporting Council's identified need to support active and healthy citizens, and an identified shortfall, especially in the indoor sports space. But I'd also like to make a plea that this is also in the right place. Other opportunities were identified around which would take up our precious open space, which is not desirable. And conversely, like schools are looking to be in an urban area where they don't have playgrounds, and I think that's an ideal match potentially made in heaven, and we should take advantage of it, but we've got to play our part and then ask the Crown to play their part in a greater sense too. So for this we get 175 hours of court time. If we were to do it alone, it's 35 I think hours less, stand to be corrected. So it's not only makes sense in terms of delivering an outcome, but makes absolute financial sense if we're in the space of helping to provide indoor court space, and Council has already predetermined through its planning and policies that is what we are doing, and that's exactly what the Community and School Partnership. So it's in the right place. Western Springs College, and unfortunately the current principal couldn't be with us today, but the Western Springs College is a welcoming, open community college. Our local board would not be supporting this project if it was in one of what I call the gated community schools. More and more intermediate and secondary schools have put up fencing around their thing. But Western Springs have already made their facilities available. We have TAPAC, which is already a tried and true pathway in terms of a partnership with that school from a decade or so ago. The Performing Arts School, if those who don't know that, is on Western Springs. The school has been completely redeveloped. I think it's the largest redevelopment in New Zealand. And it has the space, it has the will, and we have a willing partner that details need to be determined. And from a local board perspective, I urge you to support this proposal.
Thank you, Shale. Well, that's pretty much said and done, really. You add to that, Mace.
I'll get Anita, Madam Chair, just to present this. Anita's been working on this partnership for quite some time, and really at the encouragement of taking bold opportunities when they arise, so that we can leverage good value for money for the council.
Awesome. Thanks, Anita.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Board Member Shale has pretty much stolen all my thunder, but I'll quickly run through the highlights of the report. So the impetus for investigating this opportunity is really there is a significant shortage of indoor courts across Auckland. As Member Shale pointed out, the current undersupply is estimated to be around 13 indoor courts, which is going to grow to 42 indoor courts, which was identified in the National Indoor Court Strategy in 2014. But to support that, there's been a couple of independent studies completed by Auckland Basketball and also Auckland Netball, who have also confirmed that there is a significant lack of indoor courts across Auckland, and particularly in the Isthmus area. Now, the lack of provision is really curtailing their opportunity to grow as sport, and there's a significant amount of latent demand. And so that represents a whole lot of our community that are not able to participate in sport and recreation as they choose to. We forecast that the demand for indoor courts is going to grow, particularly as our city becomes more diverse, and sports like badminton and table tennis and basketball are going to become increasingly popular. The central city area is under pressing need. There are very few facilities that are available for those types of activity. And there's a particular need for venues where there are 4 or more courts, which enable sort of competitions to occur more efficiently and more effectively. We've got a number of courts around which are 1 court venues, or at the most 2. And I think North Shore Event Centre is our only 4 court centre in the city. So the opportunity at Western Springs College, the Ministry of Education are undertaking a significant rebuild of about 75% of the college. As part of that, they are funding 1 new full-size indoor court for school needs, but there is room to add an additional 4 courts so that we could have a total in 5. What we're thinking as part of this proposal is we have predominantly school use during the day, although there may be opportunities to bring other schools into the site because there is a number of other schools in the local area. And then at a time sort of around about 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon, the community sport would occur, and it would be very much in a structured, programmed sort of space rather than sort of drop-in, casual, individual. As Member Charles has pointed out, this college has had a long history of partnerships with the council, not only with TAPAC. It's one of the few remaining schools that continue to do adult education. It has a marae, which has a huge amount of community use for it. It has a couple of sports fields. Just over the summer, it made that sport fields available to the local athletics club because Walker Park was unavailable for due to renovations. So it has a strong sense of community, and it really wants to reinforce its position as the focal point of the community. This diagram gives you a very quick synopsis of how it would go. The blue box at the bottom is the MOE funded court. Stage 1, 12.3 million would give you 2 courts, which is in red, and then stage 2 potentially gives you another 2 courts at 11.7 million, so 24 million in total. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Councillor Clow, should we do questions first and then move to the recommendation? Just before we open up, I mean, I'm happy to move the recommendation, but I wondered if there was someone who's passionate about moving the recs. You're happy to? Should we let our finance chair and deputy chair move the recommendations?
Yep.
Councillor Clow and Councillor Simpson. Okay, Councillor Clow.
I am happy to move because I'm totally supportive of this, though I do have some concern about the wording in B, which I'll come back to. But in D, and it's not the wording so much, as wouldn't the ministry be doing a business case? Now, I know it's probably our fiduciary duty, we have to do one as well, but bottom line is if the ministry's doing it and spending that money, it's resource we don't need to apply to developing a business case, and we can just obviously amend what would one hopes is a very good business case by the ministry. So that's really a question on that, because again we're talking about just trying to save resources in Dean's area.
Through you, Madam Chair, the business case from the Ministry of Education's point of view has already been prepared and approved by Cabinet, so that's already gone through, which is what secured them the $79 million. Obviously, that business case, I think it was signed off about 18 months ago, so it made no mention whatsoever of a partnership or building additional indoor courts. So the business case that we need to prepare is more about the indoor courts, how that would specifically work, and it would need to be signed off by both the Ministry of Education and also Council in terms of the partnership and how that would work and how the funding would be dished out. And there is certainly opportunity to leverage off what the Ministry have already done, and certainly if we're working with them, there's cost savings around utilising their designers, utilising their engineers, their all of those sort of consultants through that process.
So my second, it is a question really, it relates to B. Why? Again, wouldn't the ministry be doing the whole conceptual design even with the extra? I mean, so I suppose my thoughts are that we should say approve the allocation of $2 million from Parks, Sports and Recs budget as Council's contribution towards the construction of the Western Springs indoor courts. Because that's just giving $2 million to the ministry to design it, towards their design costs. Now, why would we do that? Why would we not just say, look, we're willing to stump up $2 million for the construction, but why are we giving them money, $2 million towards the design of a project that's $25 million in total for stage 1 and 2, which is 10%, which is basically the entire design cost. I would suggest normal projects is about 10%. Why are we paying for the ministry's design costs of this part?
So through you, Madam Chair, you are correct that design costs are normally between 10 and 15%. So at a total project value of around 24 million, we were sort of estimating that there needed to be $2 million towards the design of the additional indoor courts. So the ministry's project is, I mean, they've got design fees to pay for the design of the $79 million, not for the additional $24 million for the indoor courts. The other part is that by committing to this partnership, one of the things we will need to secure with the Ministry of Education is some design changes to their indoor court. It mainly relates to the height of their indoor court, which they at the moment want to build at 8 metres high. We would want it to be 10 metres high because that's the standard that we need for indoor sport. And so part of the $2 million is around making them make the design changes that they need to do to their building as well. We hope that by working with the ministry that we will get cost savings around that design process. So if we were doing it on our own, this process, the design would cost $2.4 million, if not maybe more, because sometimes it can get up to 15%.
So therefore, by implication, are we up for the other 23 million after that? As I hate to say, that's the gloomy part. I mean, you know, we're going to design the whole thing, and then we're going to pay for the whole thing.
So through the chair, I mean, the business case that we'll bring back through the long-term plan will have a proposal for how the rest of the construction costs are met. So on a purely sort of mathematical basis, if the total cost is 24 and we pay for 2 million in terms of the design process, the remaining cost is 21. How we then package that, we would like to have further discussions with the Ministry of Education around whether they have the ability to fund either through role growth as the school grows, that they may be able to contribute to some of the additional courts, or if we're looking at the model of development that we take on, there might be other funding opportunities through trusts and things like that. So I think that's all what we need to explore through the business case.
Yeah, and so through you, Madam Chair, just to supplement Anita's answer, which I think was, you know, I think that's our advice to you, is that as a wayfinding opportunity with the ministry, we may be able to get better value for money in the future if we get in earlier in their development cycle around some of these things. So if we are successful in this case, it may pay dividends later on. And that is, we're asking, you to be quite bold in this situation.
So, Mace, can you confirm, do we have in our present LTP for a project like this $25 million?
I can confirm that we've got $104 million that you haven't yet allocated to development projects of this nature in our LTP.
Of this nature, indoor courts. So it's the 108 specifically indoor.
Not specifically indoor, but to provide for the provision of sport and recreation. Yeah.
So in layperson's terms, we've got a huge shortfall in indoor courts, and if you look at the stats that Active provide, we are woefully inadequate.
Yeah.
We need to build this. We're literally piggybacking. Someone else is doing a build. We're jumping in and piggybacking on that build. Otherwise, we would have to purchase land or find park space on which to build this.
Have a lesser outcome.
Sorry, Councillor, I don't mean to be a pain, but
good.
this is a lot of money. And Councillor just reminded me of clause 42, which really are, and I hear what you're saying, Mace, about we've got 108 or 104, but I mean there is currently no funding earmarked for this particular opportunity. That's the first sentence. So I know we've got 108, but I mean we've also got 500 or 600 million to buy land for parks, and we keep going 2 million here and 2 million here extra from stuff that staff don't recommend we buy, or indeed we operate afterwards. And now, I mean, I'm seeing this shrinking amount of money, pool of money going down, down, down. And I'm totally supportive. You know, that's what I'm saying. But just there's no funding earmarked for this particular opportunity. So is that, you know, 25 million out of our 104? Have we got 25 million out of 104 that's earmarked for the isthmus for an indoor facility of 4 courts?
Not specific, not in particular, but we have identified, I think, as the report says, and our advice to you, that you have a real shortage in the provision of this type of facility across the region, and in particular given the growth on the isthmus area.
Councillor Darby.
Thanks. Just exploring the budget too, because what I heard Mace say there was the 104 in that particular budget, and then there's reference to a $2 million budget, and that's $2 million only in the partnership budget. So I'm just not clear which one the intention is to draw it from.
So the first draw would be for the design and engineering costs from the sport and recreation partnerships budget,
Which is an OPEX budget.
which is
Right.
the second would be once the business case is fully completed and we report back as part of the LTP process, then that would come from your from the capital budget, the 104 unallocated.
Okay. But that larger budget, normally that the prioritisation of that budget has not been undertaken, and you're alerting us to that, and you're also you're reinforcing that fact in paragraph 43.
Yes, that's right.
So that's just for transparency, because it does sort of, well, to be fair to Councillor Clough, he's alerting us to that does breach the rules a little bit here. Would that be fair to say? I think we just need to be quite transparent about it.
It's fair to say we would be coming to you as part of the LTP demonstrating that we have a lack of provision in this type of facility to deliver sports. We're also breaking it into potentially two stages. So the first stage will be the order of $12 million and the second stage is similar number. So that could be some time out, or if we hopefully might find an angel investor maybe.
Okay. And so in terms of the partnership agreement, would there's likely to be then further spend on this over and above the 2 million?
For operational costs? Yeah.
Or let's say, question capex and opex, yeah.
There'll certainly be operational costs. Councillor Darby, I think that's the detail we'll report back in the business case. So in some of this will be pay for play. If other schools were using it, we'll be looking to recover some revenue from this facility. Also, our normal approach in budgeting is 2.5% of consequential operational costs for the capital construction that the council puts in.
So we'd be undertaking an access agreement on the back of this?
Certainly an access and a partnership agreement that guaranteed community access and look to maximise the programmable space on these courts.
The access agreement would allow us access to all the courts, not just the additional courts?
All the courts.
Okay, thank you.
And also some of the parking that's on the school. and things
Oh,
like that.
sorry, thank you for raising that. So, Madam Chair, just pursuing that one, I'm aware that there are significant car parking constraints. You won't often find me discussing car parking constraints in this council, but I understand that they are quite significant to service the school, the MOTAT, the zoo, and there's the possibility of sharing the car parking. So what I'm interested in, and my question is, will the sharing and efficient use of the car parking be explored in the agreement?
Madam Chair, can I just answer that?
And I just before you do, Shal, Michael's sitting at the back. Bless your heart, Mr. Motat, he's still here, and I think I'm getting a bit of a signal, I'm hoping, which is, yes, we will explore that. Am I correct, Michael? It's a bit unconventional, but
Through the
question was
chair,
asked.
I deliberately stayed because I knew this item was coming up. Just from MOTAT's point of view, we fully support the addition of the courts at Western Springs College. But there is a significant parking nightmare developing in the Western Springs precinct. We have a perfect storm developing both through the museum's parking requirements. The school doesn't have adequate parking on site for its own requirements. We have Seddon Fields, which is now AstroTurf and is being utilised to the full extent within the same period that these courts will be used. And we have Auckland Transport in the process of proposing that dual cycleways are put into Miola Road, which will push car parking from Miola Road into the residential areas and into the museum's car park, which is small. So there is a potentially, literally an explosive situation developing there. We have a solution, which we have brought up with the local board, the school and the ministry, whereby we develop the rough-looking bit of land down the side of the tram tracks, which will accommodate 370 cars. And the idea was to share during school hours with the school, and then after hours entering into some sort of arrangements with the use with Seddon Fields and this. But one small problem is that to develop that car park's another $3 million. So I would be, I have suggested to Auckland Transport, to the Ministry of Education, and I suppose suggesting to you as well, this committee, that there is a solution there by working together where people contribute towards the cost of that, and I can say that the museum is prepared to, out of its resources, to contribute at least $1 million towards that. Working together, we can actually provide a solution, but it needs to be factored into these type of discussions. I hope that's helpful for the committee.
That's useful.
Madam
I mean,
Chair,
we
that-
won't solve everything and
Right.
cannot solve everything this afternoon, but at
No,
least
the
we've
local
tipped
board
out
has
the issue.
recognised this issue for some time.
Yeah.
However, there is still plenty of parking in that area, and this is welcome to the brave new world of the inner city. So there's not just one solution, but that has been a solution that's suggested. The local board is very, very supportive of demand management in terms of solutions for parking, which means paid parking, to rationalise parking in on-demand areas. And so that also provides a potential source of revenue going forward to fund parking solutions. So we're very conscious of this, and today with RFA we've kicked off a Western Springs precinct plan, which is a high-level strategic look at coordinating all the various entertainment and passive recreation. This is an amazing part of the city as a precinct, and is going to go from strength to strength, and this is just part of the development of it in its future, adding one more thing to like Western Springs football field. Thanks to the predecessors of this committee and the investment in the turfing of 2.5 fields there, the membership of Western Springs Football Club has doubled in the last 4 years to 2,500 members. We sometimes forget we should congratulate ourselves on what we're being inundated with success in many parts of the city, and this is an example of it. So yes, we as a local board wish to continue the discussions about those sorts of solutions, and that one in particular. But it won't be the only solution, there's multiple solutions.
Okay, awesome.
Just to
Back to
round
you,
it off,
Councillor-
Madam Chair.
Yeah, I was just
Oh.
going to see if Councillor Darby,
Thank you.
that you're cool with that?
Yep,
We've
with
just
the
got-
expectation that if there's a car park of 370, not only is the museum paying and others, but the users are paying.
That's what I said, demand management.
I've just got Councillor Walker,
That's what that means.
Wayne Walker, Councillor Lee and Councillor Watson, and then I think we'll bring this together. Oh, and Councillor Simpson. Okay, Councillor Wayne
Yeah,
Walker.
just want to raise very briefly the issues around the deal that goes to this, and I'm mindful that this council is between a rock and a really hard place around our debt. I mean, a really hard place. So in respect of any negotiation, we should be looking to defer anything out in terms of payment on our part as long as we possibly can, because right now we are debt poor. The government wants this, so let's structure a deal like the sort of deals that the government strikes to us, where they screw us down. The boot's on our foot here, and we should be applying it. So I have real concerns that this is another instance where we're dipping into our pocket, effectively the ratepayer's pocket, racking up our debt at a point when we cannot afford it. And I also note, as far as cost is concerned, and this goes back to the local board discussion earlier, that we're talking about operational costs here around parking. And who's going to meet those? I'd suggest that the buck will be stopping with us around that. So again, we're effectively subsidising the government on an ongoing basis.
It's kind of the other way.
They're subsidising us, mate.
Well-
They're subsidising us.
The government wants this, Madam Chair. This is provision for schooling and the like as much as it delivers for us.
Okay. I think, actually, our community wants this, and we're trying to work out between us and the government how we can effectively get it.
So I had a question around structuring as it goes to debt.
So debt, we will deal with that when the business case comes back.
It's in the long-term plan, it's
It
already
is.
funded.
So councillor Lee, Mark Lee, you're next.
Could be the next long-term plan.
I have to say, Madam Chair, when I get communications and brochures offering me exciting opportunities, I'm always a little bit careful. I was at a meeting yesterday with the local board when I understand the board was briefed on this. I'm not too sure what the formal position is, but clearly this is a significant strategic initiative between the government and the council, and it should not just relate to one particular school. What I'm concerned about is there is a certain rush, let's meet this opportunity while we can sort of mentality. We don't have a coherent region-wide approach to it. Councillor Walker has reminded us how tough the Ministry of Education has been on this council. Virtually, if I could use the word, blackmailing us into buying land to protect it from development. So they've taken a very hard-nosed approach in dealing with this council when it comes to looking after their interests, and good luck to them. I think we need a much more regional overview if we're going to go down this path, because this would just be the start. The $2 million donation towards designing the courts is obviously just the start, and I think we need, before we rush into it right now, we need a much more comprehensive region-wide approach on how, how will this play out? What other opportunities are there, and how are we going to fund this if we want to do this? But to go in on rush in on an ad hoc basis right now without thinking through all the consequences, I think is premature. I hate to say that, but that's my feeling.
Thank you, councillor Lee. Councillor Watson.
Thank you. First question, just on that matter of cost, and particularly as it goes to cost comparability. What are the other courts or proposals that we're comparing that $5 million per court comparison with?
Through you, Madam Chair, there's been a recent 6-court indoor court development in Auckland, which was costed at $31 million, so it's around about $5 million per court.
Papakura.
Papakura.
That including land acquisition?
No, just build cost. There is also a number of comparable feasibility studies which have been done, which have also had indoor courts costed in around about the $5.5 million mark. There is a slight cost premium at Western Springs College due to the underlying ground conditions being at an ex-landfill. However, we have done an extensive analysis around what are the other opportunities within the CBD, Central City area, and the only other available land that we can see has those same underlying land conditions as well. So there really isn't a lot of other opportunities in the central area if we want to build indoor courts.
Yeah.
Could I just also add very quickly, I'm probably stealing Mace's thunder here, one of the reasons why this report is coming to you, and I do appreciate that it is a report of significant magnitude, the Ministry of Education are shortly about to appoint their design and build contractor, and once that appointment occurs, they will then start the process of detailed design and construction of their courts. So the window of opportunity for us to work with the Ministry of Education is now, and so the way that we've structured the recommendation in terms of contributing to the design process is to preserve that opportunity. I do appreciate that $2 million is a significant investment to preserve. However, then gives us then the room and the time to then consider through the business case and the LTP process the greater investment.
Okay, just on final question on the school itself. Current roll's 1,400, capacity there to nearly double to 2,500, and it is in an area of rapid growth. In terms of access, I'm assuming the school's getting to use all the courts during the day up to 3:30 or 4 o'clock, whatever it is. In terms of that potential roll growth, which is significant, I don't know in the normal course of events if that would necessarily qualify for another gymnasium, you know, through the Ministry of Education. I'm not quite sure what that entitlement is. What is our ability then to factor in that roll growth to our potential component of the design or the build at this stage? Given that is going to occur, we've had a minister who has said that.
Yes, I can start this, Madam Chair. So we've split the proposal into 2 stages, and that roll growth, if that occurs, that would be a factor in the funding of the capital funding in the second stage. So at that stage, we were looking for another contribution from the school Ministry of Education if they had a greater demand than their current roll.
So Mace, when we say contribution, what does that mean?
Well, that's what we need to work through in the business case in terms of identifying what programmable time they would need and would desire in those courts with that roll growth. But that would be either funding a further court, Ministry of Education, and so they would fund Court 4, for example, and we would fund Court 5 in that second stage.
Just a quick thing before we go to Councillor Simpson and Councillor Clow. At a meeting I had with Auckland Basketball and verified by Active, we're currently 14 courts short in the Isthmus, and by 2030 we will be 41 courts short in this area. So, you know, we are chronically under, we are short of these playing venues, that it's actually our responsibility to get out and build. And, you know, at the moment we've got this opportunity to join with someone else and build, no less than that. Councillor Simpson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to get my head around, in principle, I absolutely agree with this, because here's an opportunity. Basically, we get 5 courts for the price potentially of less than 5 courts somewhere else. I do know that we're short of space. So my questions are around, I heard both Anita and Shale both say that, you know, this was really about the isthmus or the old, potentially Auckland City Council area. And there wasn't any other, there's pretty much no other it says here, no practical alternative site options in the area. But then, Anita, you just said a while ago that there potentially was, that you identified, but it had the same issues as Western Springs. What was the area that you were referring to?
Through the Madam Chair, on paragraph 37, there's a table of the alternative site options. Really the only other sort of freely available land, if you could call it that, is Chamberlain Park and Mount Albert, which does have a whole lot of other significant issues swirling around that particular site. So
I want to go there.
No, don't go there.
Yeah.
Okay, so thank you for clarifying it, because what I was going to just mention, Madam Chair, is that the Oiraki ward is part of the Isthmus, and Colin Maiden Park, which is owned by the council, has a master plan which was completed in August 2016, which has the use of basketball available there. So it wasn't in the report as an option. It is definitely an option. It's been identified in the master plan. So without putting a finer point on it, I don't think that your report was correct when it said there was no other alternative sites other than the ones mentioned, because there is, and basketball is identified there. My problem is the $2 million, if we commit $2 million, we're committing the lot almost, because you can't go back. $2 million is a lot to put in. It's a bit like, you know, we've heard it before, it's a bit like putting 10,000 or 20,000 or 50,000 or 100,000 into a master plan for something that you never actually get ahead and do. So I want everyone to be really clear that the 2 million actually means we're going to progress it. But the devil is actually in the detail. And if I look at actually, and I've had a bit of experience around partnerships, just, you know, is on item 21. So I get that the school uses it for the 90 hours. I get that's pretty much during the school hour. The 50 school sport hours is obviously after school, right? And I want to know kind of, does that go to 4, 5 o'clock? Because the reality is that this becomes a community facility that's only available from, say, 5 till whatever. 10. Is that 10 o'clock? Is that the time? So it's 5 till 10 and then the weekends. So I think it's really just important for us to understand that the school's actually getting quite a lot as well. So to that end, in the negotiations between what their advantages are, we've got to be very clear that even though council can administer potentially, and hopefully that's how you would frame it, through our booking system to keep it all impartial, that it is actually a sort of an early evening run. The school's actually getting a big whack of 5 courts.
You're also giving the land for nothing.
I should probably
through-
at this stage, I think we might just get our 2 staff to answer the questions.
Through you,
Member
Madam Chair,
Sharp.
through the feasibility study, we have looked at how we would structure the use of the facilities. So the 50 court hours for the school sport is predominantly before school,
Oh, good. Okay.
and then an hour after school. So we were talking about the 3 till 4 slot, and so
Good.
we'd be looking at community sport happening from 4 until
That's when
10
we need
o'clock
it.
at the night.
Because that's when we need it, and that's not actually in here. It talks about hours, but it doesn't actually say how that's put together. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks. And you did take my point around Colin Maiden.
Oh, yes, through Madam Chair, absolutely. We're very well aware of the work at Colin Maiden Park, and really it was more about the geographic area that we were looking at, so I was sort of focused more about the central city area, and even though Colin Maiden Park is in the isthmus, we didn't kind of extend the area to that far away. I mean, I guess one of the issues to sort of point out is this is going to deliver 5 indoor courts if we did the full investment. Given the level of under provision, we're going to need multiple venues
fives.
across the region. This isn't the panacea for the whole indoor court provision issue.
No, I get where you're coming from. I think that whoever does the negotiation between us and the ministry needs to, the chief operating officer, be very smart in their negotiations.
I think, Madam Chair, just a comment really that we're well aware of that, and a negotiating strategy will put that together, and particularly your opening comments about Minister Kay's announcement on the
He's
weekend.
keen to do it though.
Yep. She is keen, so the Mayor and I will be meeting with her soon.
He gets it.
So I've got Councillor Klein, Member Brown, but I'll just get our Chief Operating Officer to make a couple of comments. Mr. Ops.
Mr. Ops. Okay, so listening to this, I guess my take on it, we've got a demonstrable need, okay? That this is a new way of doing things, and I think you'll see it happen increasingly. And the benefit I believe you get, notwithstanding the timing of some of these things, is if we combine our capital and investment with that of others, the objective is, instead of paying $20 million each, we might spend 35 and save 5, in which we share the benefit of that. So you'd expect multiplier or leverage on that investment to get a better overall outcome. And I think as I listen into this discussion, although I think that there might be more capital to be spent than what we're currently providing for if we address car parking issues, but let's put that to one side, the discussions about netball courts. my gut instinct, we're doing the right thing here in terms of provision, developing a facility for which there's clear need, and you get an opportunity now which, short of Chamberlain Park, you don't really have a location in this part of Auckland that you can invest in this way. My take on the design issue, and I've heard a lot of discussion around that, is that you should be committing up to $2 million there. You'll take a staged approach on that. There will be a business case that comes out of this. This business case may or may not get up for the provision of the 4 additional courts. But let's work in the assumption that it will. And that business case, you've heard the staff talk to the fact that it'll have to demonstrate value, but also look at alternative funding sources, and it will time that, so you'll have 2 chunks of capital investment. There is a pot of money available, 104 million, so you've heard that from staff. Our obligation will be to help track how that's being earmarked or allocated, so you're quite clear on how far through you are on your 104. The challenge you will have will be keeping within that, because the demand is going to exceed supply, and so if you commit 25 now, 25% of it is effectively gone. That's not to say you shouldn't do this, I'm just being really clear that you need to track, and we will assist you with this, with that. And we will need to understand in the business case what the operating expenditure implications are and make sure that's properly provided for. So that's my take on where this discussion is at, to the degree it's helpful.
Want to amend the resolution then, Madam Chair?
We'll amend B, because I was going to amend it to approve the allocation of up to 2 million.
Okay. Staff were on to it. Excellent. Councillor Clow.
Following, I think, the good points that my colleague at my left here, Councillor Lee, was making, I mean, we do get a lot of things passed on to us by the government, and let's not fool ourselves. This new partnership deal that is being offered in schools is a double-edged sword, and it's wonderful if instead of spending 40 in tandem we only spend 35, but we don't want to get, I hate to say it, screwed where we spend 20 and the ministry spends 15. And, you know, it can be that we're the ones that get suckered on this consistently, because that has been the case. Now, as Mr. Kimpton pointed out to me, this is all televised anyway, so they can get an extract, or they're watching now. So basically the ministry, you know, may be watching, but they can certainly just drag it up and just basically say, oh, well, we've managed to get this out of them, and, you know, this is all committed. So I think it's just continually you're going to have to be, you know, because I think 3 or 4 of us have given the message to the ministry who are watching that we want to be hard-nosed about this. We're not just going to get done over and basically subsidising. So I just want to ask a question, one question. In the ministry's business case, did it say its design, which they put up, the 79 million project, didn't have adequate provision of indoor courts for the school?
Through Madam Chair, the Ministry's business case included 1 indoor court, which is sufficient for their role as it is now, and they forecast that they will have role growth and indicated that they'll probably need another indoor court when the school approaches 2,500. So, but they did not have funding for the second indoor court, they've only got funding for the first. So their business case is focused on what does the school need.
So that would be a pretty sound argument how we're getting screwed straight from the start. So, you know, they've got 1 court, we'll give you another one later, but, oh, no, you don't need it because the council built 4. So, you know, hey, we've taken care of that problem. Don't need to do that later, do we?
Through you, Madam Chair, we've been quite clear in our discussions with the Ministry of Education that if we do come and invest in additional courts that are for community, you know, they're created for community use, that doesn't factor into the Ministry's calculations of role growth, of what the school needs for role growth perspective. So we have indicated quite strongly to them that that would be part of our discussion as through the business case process.
And part of the community access agreement, Madam Chair.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, just hang on a sec, Councillor Clow. I think if we just need to keep this within the bounds of good partnership discussion. I understand the need for us to be cautious, and as Chair of Finance, it's absolutely, up to you to remind us of our fiduciary duty. However, let's also acknowledge the fact that we are going into this with our eyes wide open to say we are chronically short and have probably been, successive councils have been a bit derelict in their duty in actually providing for sports facilities in parts of Auckland. So we are in big catch-up mode. We're looking for an opportunity to get the best out of an opportunity that a school might be offering and that the government might be offering. Are we going to get screwed in this? Of course we aren't. We're very clear about what we require, but the bottom line is we need help. So the business case needs to take into consideration that we are buying access and provision of courts for our community on the isthmus. The school or the Ministry of Ed is purchasing its courts for its school and their requirements. The business case and the movement in the middle between 1/2 courts is the process for negotiation and the partnering agreement between us. No one will be screwed, believe you me, if we have our way.
Good idea, actually, isn't it?
That's fine, thank you.
Member Brown.
Smart move from management.
Kia ora.
How do you get out of that one?
There are some comments that, and right from the get-go, Madam Chair, when I read a report that says it's got a court, but it'd be really great if we grow with population, but let's advance the structure first, I'm sort of a bit lost. So I'm glad that that last comment around growth with role is potentially an option that just feels like it's just been dismissed. That sort of money can buy townships in this country. It certainly will go a hell of a long way to something that's not a luxury, like housing or land for housing, housing people to live. With respect to the school, and I know it very well, the fear I have in this great generosity of this council is complacency sets in the minute we adopt this. So I haven't heard, and maybe it's premature, it will come later, but served on 3 establishment boards on 2 schools that wanted stuff that weren't in their budgets. You know what they did? They went to their community and raised the money themselves. One was for an audio theatre at Botany College, and one was for a voice-activated science lab at Ormiston College. So I'm not hearing that, and the fear I have is the generosity of council is simply just going to make a whole heap of people quite complacent, because why do anything in council or MOE will do it. So I'm slightly flustered by MOE's initial investment if they're not playing the ball. We're hoping a lot of the officials to negotiate in a manner whereby it just feels like we need this now and it's an opportunity, and my view is, we were privileged to host Oklahoma City Thunder for 48 hours, and one question, without any business case, was posed to a player. He immediately gave the money to build a court for Starship, right then and there, in front of me. That wasn't on the business case. So I'm a bit concerned about the new way we're doing things insofar as the disappointment that's waiting other people that's not a luxury with the available fund, like green spaces and the like for the region. Hearing the traffic dynamics and logistics and challenges that surround this opportunity, is it an opportunity or is it a hinaki, an eel trap? Because once your head goes in, you ain't getting your body out. And that's the reality of what I'm hearing. So, question I do have. Has the case, or is the case considering other funders? Is it considering Auckland's generosity of themselves, i.e. philanthropy within the Blinken district, who may have gone to that school and benefited and became a somebody? Or is it just simply going to lay its cards on this table? Because if you do this today, folks, I'm going to hold you to account when South Auckland or West Auckland or any other part of Auckland walks in the door and seizes on the new way we do business. So I am conscious of disappointment that has actually found some of us in the planning mechanics of LTP, annual plans with local boards and others, for stuff where people were not asking for luxuries. They were asking for necessities. And so I just fear that we're setting precedents. I fear that later on this precedent's actually going to be cast region-wide, and it's almost going to look like you're selective on who you propose to support. In the end, like in the beginning, ministry didn't front up, it still hasn't fronted up, and it ain't going to front up if you go and fill its voids every time it chooses to be shallow on its budgets. Kia ora.
Okay.
So, Madam Chair,
My
just quickly an
understanding is
answer.
we asked the ministry.
To answer to the question, the business case will look at other alternative funders, and we'll report back to you on that and what that means in terms of how we might achieve this project. But to be clear, we went to Western Springs, Madam Chair, with this proposal as opposed to Western Springs or the ministry coming to us.
Apologies, Mason, I just learnt that as you started talking.
Sure. Thank you.
Okay. I've got Member Wilcox, Councillor Filipaina, Councillor Watson, and I think we might be starting to go around in circles if we carry on any longer. Member Wilcox.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just drawn back to the Mags case, our CCO with the swimming pool, which started off, I'm sure, with great guns, but it's kind of, I don't know where it's ended up, but ended up quite a sad situation at one stage there when we had the CCO committee monitoring it all. So I suppose I need surety that we're not going to end up in a Mags again, because basically we won't be here, but somebody will be picking that up. In 20 years' time, when the courts are all cactus and old and everything else, and there's a refurbishment, and the school says, we don't want to pay the $50 million because that's what it's going to cost then, and we're going to say, well, we can't afford the $50 million either, and then it just goes around in circles. So how are we going to protect the council from that situation?
So our intention is that that's part of what we investigated in the business case. But having said that, we have learnt lessons from previous decisions with Mount Albert, with the pool. However, so that is all about the ownership and how the council takes on that ownership of those courts and being clear up front around the replacement maintenance of the courts and control. Governance control. So we'll be reporting in the business case what the risks are and what the benefits are of each of those options.
I was a member of that trust for a number of years. I'm acutely aware of that and already had that conversation with them.
So we would fund OPEX of our portion of the court, and we may well depreciate as well, so that we've got a renewals budget. We would take charge of that as if we'd built them ourselves, my understanding would be.
And we would be looking to have some pay for play opportunities as well to support OPEX.
$60 an hour for courts. Councillor Filipaina.
Thank you, Chair. I'm trying to get my head around a few things, and so just a few questions. Firstly, Chair, in the stage one, 12.3 million. You're asking that the money be put into 17, 18, 18, 19 budget. That's what I've read.
Through you, Madam Chair, the business case would be seeking the funding for the capital component of stage one, which would be around about 10.5 million, I would say, after we've taken off the component for design. And would be seeking it ideally in year 1 or year 2 of the LTP, so either 2018-19 or 2019-20. And the main reason we'd be doing that is to try and dovetail into the Ministry of Education's construction program, because then obviously there's a whole lot of cost savings around the contractor and procurement and all of those types of things. However, we will put up options for other alternatives of when you would, when you could do the construction as well.
Okay, and through your chair, just because I got confused with 41.3, when you said that the 12.3 million funding would be required 17, 18, 18, 19. That's where I got confused, but you're saying later. So that's where that's one confusion there. And the other one is around the business case, because when you have a look at the recommendation and the business case, I assumed initially that the business case was going to be for that stage one and being incorporated there, but from the recommendation, the business case will be completed for the project, long-term plan in 2019, and that's the project commencement. Am I assuming that's stage two? Or is the business case going to incorporate stage one and also the possibility of stage two with the cost that you've outlined on page 123, which is 11.7 for court 4 and 5?
Through Madam Chair, I do apologise for the confusion between the two paragraphs. So the business case would be for the entire project.
Right.
So for stages 1 and 2, but we would give you options around how that could be timed. So, we'll give you an option to time stage 1 in conjunction with the Ministry of Education's construction timeframes. We'd give you an option to time it later, and then we'd also give some other options around when stage 2 could be built as well.
Yep, sorry.
Bearing in mind, one of the things that we would like to do is then work in with when we expect further construction to happen on the school site as well from their role growth perspective.
Yeah, so and that goes to the question that Councillor Watson raised earlier around the growth and also the ability to add in stage 2, possibly 4 and 5 if the growth is that fast. It's again a matter of bringing it back to council, but also having a conversation with the Ministry of Education. If the growth is that fast, and this is why I took note of what Councillor Watson said around the growth and the current role, that if it's that fast, surely the conversations will then go back to the Ministry of Education and say, look, all these projections are actually out of kilter, and the role has gone that much. Then when the council's looking at our stage 2 for courts 4 and 5, here's an opportunity, MOE. I don't like, with all the corridor that we've had here, I don't like our chances of them saying, yeah, of course, we'll give you some money for another court. But, it's just at least for us is to get their business case. Chair, the other question that I have for me is that I've looked through the whole report and I can't see when the business case will be coming back to this particular committee.
Good question.
Or finance and performance, I don't know where it's coming back. Sorry, Chair.
They'll be reporting back, Madam Chair, before you consider as part of the LTP preparation.
Next year.
It's probably
I'm
likely,
hoping it's this year. With
it'll
stage 1, I'm
it'll
hoping.
be this year when we're reporting back on the business case. It'll inform your decisions you make for the LTP.
Okay, and Chair, are we taking comments now or just later, Alligator?
I hope there is no later. I think
Okay.
we've taken comments and questions. My last speaker is Councillor Watson, and then we're going to put it. So if you've got anything else to say it now.
Just for me, Chair, and it's the report that you ended up receiving around the shortage of basketball courts. And I think it is important that we realise that. I also take the point that Member Brown has said around the precedent, but I know in Manukau City Council we had also the shared or the ability to partner with our schools around that in the Manukau days, which we found, and this is not only with our schools but with our football clubs. And I think, Chair, it was the reason we got involved with that, and I was only, I only went into council in 03, but part of the reason and the mentality around that was because there was a need identified. And I think this is what's happened, Chair. There has been a need identified. How do we end up fulfilling that need for our community. And I mean, this is just one option. I look forward to the full business case, especially with stage one, around the 10.3 million, because we're taking up to 2 million off from the design stage and engineering. But that's the reason why we ended up in Manukau, looking at partnering, and Sharon would know this, that we ended up partnering with our clubs and schools because there was a need that was identified and we wanted to make sure. And even Councillor Newman, Daniel in his last term as well, you know, there was a lot of stuff, even with Mandurewa, the netball courts and the work that we're doing there. So it has been identified. I fully support the recommendations here, and I'm glad that Councillor Clow put up to 2 million. That was one of the ones that I wanted to also mention. So, yeah, congratulations on the report, even though you confused me a little bit.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Filipaina. And last speaker, Councillor Watson.
Thank you. Yeah, I fully understand the tight spot we're in terms of provision of indoor space, and that goes right across the region, and we do have to be creative and innovative. I agree, however, with my fellow councillors that we really have to negotiate hard at the outset. A lot of people have concentrated on the financial aspects of that. My concern is with the public use of the facility. I'm familiar with schools and how their demand for indoor space in particular, given the increasing makeup of school populations is growing and growing, and often their usage goes from 6 in the morning to 8 to 9 at night in numbers of instances. So I am just assuming that the public use of it is very, very tightly tied down, that it anticipates a growing population, and that if the deal that's struck is going to be on the side of the community, given the fact that we will be largely funding the additional courts, albeit on school land. Thank you very much. The schools are getting the use during the day. That's fine. There's not a great community demand there in most instances. But certainly outside of that is tied down tight, and that other ways of involving more of the community are also explored. And in this instance, we've talked about organised sport. I would like to see a more informal element brought in there, because that often appeals to younger people to come in and you get that in council owned facilities. I would imagine, given the hours that we've been assured are going to be, i.e. largely from 4 to 10 and all weekends, that there is ability to factor in some informal usage as well in that overall public use component. And just finally, Mace, and I understand negotiations are going off. Are we going to be party to the final sort of usage agreement then that is negotiated with the school over and above the business case?
You will be.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Watson. Right, I'm going to put the recommendations. Been moved by Councillor Close, seconded Councillor Simpson. I'll put all those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried.